There's a true story told about a hitchhiker in Los Angeles one time. Was trying to get a ride, bum a ride one night, and finally a driver pulled off to the side of the road and picked him up. And when this hitchhiker got into the car, he recognized the face of the guy who was driving. It was a famous Hollywood actor, Kirk Douglas. And so this hitchhiker gets into the car. He looks at him, well, Kirk Douglas. You know, all he could think of to ask in that moment was, do you know who you are? And that's a good question, isn't it? Do you know who you are? Really, do you know who you are? Well, I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. I'm an independent. I'm bowing out this year and not voting at all. Maybe you're a mom or a dad, or you're a cancer survivor or a divorce survivor. You might say you're an addict. You're addicted to something. You might call yourself an American or a patriot or a taxpayer. You might be a business owner, a salesman, a teacher. Maybe you're a retiree. Maybe your counselor, your therapist has labeled you with post-traumatic stress disorder or depression or something along those lines, and you have this label. We wear a lot of hats in this world, don't we, as far as titles and identities go? Some are very important to us, and some we'd rather not talk about at all. We don't want people to know about that part of our lives. But we wear a lot of hats in this world, and when we think about the greater cause that Peter is about to talk about here, and when we walk into that voting booth on Tuesday morning, or Tuesday whenever, there's something way more important to remember. Okay, if you're taking notes, here's the first one. We need to, number one, remember our true identity. Let's remember our true identity. Now, 1 Peter in chapter 2, verses 9 and 10, Peter writes, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his possession, so that you may proclaim the praises of the one who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." I wish I had time to go and expound on each one of these identifiers, these identities of ours, because each one is packed with so much description, but I thought I'd summarize it here this way. Our true identity is that we find purpose within the royal family of God. Isn't that cool? Like, we are royalty. Go home and tell your friends that. Go tell your family that I'm royalty. I belong to a royal line, the royal line of Jesus Christ, right? So we are royalty. If we're a follower of Jesus Christ, then God has given you purpose in life because you belong to this royal family, his church. God chose us to belong exclusively to his family, and he out of his mercy, he is making us holy. He's making us distinctive in this world. Now, it didn't used to be this way, did it? Many of us lived evil lives before our life in Christ. Paul reminds us of this in Colossians 1:21. Once you were alienated and hostile in your minds as expressed in your evil actions. At one time, we were enemies of God on a path to hell. We were evil at one time. Then he says, I love, this is like two of my favorite words in the whole New Testament. He says, but now. You used to be this way, but now he has reconciled you by his physical body through his death to present you, here it is, holy, faultless, and blameless before him. Isn't that great? We used to be this way. We used to be evil. Now we're blameless. Now we're righteous because of what he's done to us through Jesus Christ. It's great. One of my favorite verses is 1 John 3:1. I thought Lyle was going there in his communion meditation, but he didn't. Appreciate that. 1 John 3:1 says, "See what great love the Father has given us that we should be called God's children, and we are." Emphasis on that, and we are. Like, this is huge. This is who we are. We are children of God. So when we go to vote on Tuesday, and as we go about our everyday living, let us remember who we are. Our true identity is that we are children of God. Let's remember that. Okay? Number 2, let's then also remember our true citizenship, Peter goes on in verse 11 and he says, "Dear friends, I urge you as strangers and exiles." Isn't that weird language? Strangers and exiles to abstain. Here's what you need to do. Abstain from sinful desires that wage war against the soul. So my daughter outed me earlier in the video about Christmas. I'm going to out her. And she said I was allowed to tell this story. I always do that. If I'm going to talk about my family, I always get permission first. One night, Dawn and I were sitting on the couch watching television, and suddenly Olivia came downstairs, burst into the room, and she had a very important question to ask us. So we looked up from the couch, and we looked at her, and very, very important, like she was all serious. She says, "What are we?" That was our reaction too. We burst out laughing. Like, where is this 7-year-old going? This happened when she was 7 years old. I forgot to set that stage. It wasn't like yesterday. So she's 7 years old. She wants to know what we are. We're laughing, and she looks at us and she rephrases her question. He says, "Where does our family come from?" We went, "Oh." And that's an important question to some of us, isn't it? Like, we want to know where our family originated from. What's our ancestry? And so I've always been curious about my ancestry. So a few years ago, you ever do this? Spit into that tube, send it off to Ancestry.com or one of those places, and you get the report back, So the more people that do this, they update your profile on their website. So every once in a while you can go back and look and say, okay, now I'm more of this than this. So last week I looked, I don't know if you're interested or not. If you're not, just fall asleep during this part. But I found out I'm 44% German. Shocker, right? I'm 40% English or Northwestern European, 12% Scottish, 3% Irish, and just 1%, I don't know where this comes from, but just 1% Welsh. I'm proud of my Welsh ancestry. While that's all fascinating to me, where my family originated from is not nearly as important as to where I am a citizen of now, where my family are citizens now. Does that make sense? Like, we are citizens of the United States of America, and I think that's great. I love this country. I've always been a patriot, and I love that we were born here as citizens of the United States of America. We've got a lot of freedoms and rights. I love that we've got the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Isn't that great? We have the right to bear arms. We have the freedom of speech. We have the right to worship God in any manner we deem pleasing. We live in a capitalistic society, which means I can go out and get a job and make a bunch of money and go out and spend my money however I want it, like Ancestry.com, finding out where I came from. But I love it. I love that we live in this country. We have the right to vote. We can vote on issues. We can vote on taxes. We can vote who's going to lead our country. It's a great place to be a citizen of. We have lots of privileges in this country. But Peter says, hold on, Peter says we're strangers. The NIV, if you have the NIV open this morning, it says foreigners. Foreigners. We are foreigners. A foreigner is a person not native to or naturalized in the country or jurisdiction under consideration. So a foreigner would not have the same full rights as a citizen would. A foreigner would not have the same full rights. So what Peter is saying here is that yes, you live on planet Earth, and yes, you may have certain rights and certain freedoms here while you're living on this planet. However, we do not have the right to act as the world does. We do have the right to act like children of God. So this is good stuff, right? So Peter says you're strangers. Then he calls us exiles, and exile is someone who doesn't belong in a foreign land. And so we live in this world. We've been living here for a while, but this is not our permanent home. We belong somewhere else. And so we don't belong here. Paul says in Ephesians 2:19, here it is. So now you are no longer foreigners and strangers. You have a home with your fellow citizens, with the saints, the church, the called out ones, and you are members of God's household. We have a family. We're not strangers and exiles here with his church. Isn't that cool? Now, Philippians 3:20 says, our citizenship is in heaven. Praise be to God. I look forward to that day when we can live in heaven. And so we need to remember that we are citizens of heaven. That is who we are. That is what we are. We are citizens of heaven. Right now we live in enemy territory. Satan and his demonic friends are all around us, trying to move into our lives, trying to corrupt our hearts from God, trying to steal, kill, and destroy, right? That's what they're trying to do to us. And so, as citizens of heaven, church, we ought to be doing all that we can to live in perfect unity so that the world may know that it is all about the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ. There ought to be unity here in that. We ought to be unified in what the grace and mercy of God can do. Because you know, in politics today, there is great division. That's an understatement. Man, you turn on the news, you turn on the TV, you turn on the radio, you hear it, right? Just division everywhere. This party's saying this party's saying that, Kamala saying this, and Donald Trump saying that. Back and forth they go, and just this big divide. It's almost split right down the middle. There's this division and dissension among everybody in the United States of America today, and that's a tragedy. But you know what a greater tragedy is? When division and dissension occur in the church. When we're at odds with one another, because it destroys the cause of Christ. It destroys it. And so we must think, what is the world thinking when we're divided and we have dissension among us? What must they think when the citizens of heaven fight amongst themselves? It's not good. That's why Jesus says in John 13:35, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you what? Love one another.